Coming up on the Paper Talk today, it's the morning after the night before. We're going to be talking about the Manchester derby. There's all sorts going on, isn't there? Gary Neville's not happy with it. Ruben Amorim's pushing back. Also, Pep Guardiola is not too pleased with some of the chants he's heard. Let's get into it. Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, I'm outside Old Trafford and it's pretty sunny, but it is a little bit cold, so you might well put your parkas on. Loads of stories to get through, a lot of them focusing on the Manchester derby. Of course, a pretty drab affair, according to Gary Neville and according to a lot of people that might have watched it. To be fair, you might not have been impressed with the 0-0 draw between Manchester United and Manchester City, and I do understand that. Before we get into that, though, make sure you are hitting like, share and subscribe. We want to get to 800,000 subscribers on the channel, and with your support, we can get there. Yeah, Gary Neville was quite scathing in his assessment of the Manchester derby. He even ended up apologising for his co-commentary because he said he was pretty negative during his co-coms because he felt the game was pretty drab and boring. He said that it lacks a bit of blood and fire and courage and risk and all the things you'd want to see from a Manchester derby. Now, I understand why he was critical. He said about the players, he said they're robotic, they're micromanaged within an inch of their lives and all this stuff. He also felt that maybe a little bit too friendly towards one another. I think he said they could go for a roast dinner after the game together. And you do, I get it, right? You do want to see in a Manchester derby that real sort of passion and thunder and fury. That's the kind of things we like to see in a derby. But I do feel as though Gary Neville was being a little bit harsh. And I think Ruben Amorim himself said, pushed back slightly on it when he was asked about it. Said, look, you know, Gary Neville is always critical, that kind of thing. But he did give a little bit of context. He said, look, you're looking at, I think Ruben Amorim said, the worst Manchester United side in history. What he means about that is probably Premier League history. We know we are. We're in the bottom half of the table in, what, April? That never happens at Manchester United in the Premier League. It has never happened before. Do you remember when we were 8th last season? Everyone thought that was an absolute disaster. And now we'd probably, you know, we'd be buzzing. We'd get a nosebleed if we got up to the dizzy heights of 8th. So I get where Ruben Amorim is coming from. Also, as well, he spoke about the fact that this isn't a vintage Manchester City team, sorry. City, compared to how they've done in recent years, are struggling. I mean, there's touch and go whether they're going to make the Champions League, which is almost unheard of for them in the recent era, since all the money came into them and since they faced them 115 charges. But this is where we're at. You're at two sort of underperforming Manchester teams going toe-to-toe with one another, and that kind of showed a little bit in the game. It wasn't a great game, but I do feel that you have to have a little bit of context, and I think that's what Ruben Amorim was saying. And look, I'm not going to make excuses. I expect Manchester United to be better than we were yesterday, but I do feel like you need a bit of context. You look at the players that we're missing. Yes, City are missing Erling Haaland and they're missing Rodri as well, but Manchester United are missing some key players. Kobbie Mainoo, who was, you know, player of the match in the Manchester derby in the FA Cup final, not available. Lisandro Martinez, who'd been, you know, back to his best and scoring goals from defence, not available. Ahmad, who caused City no end of problems in the game at the Etihad, obviously had a hand in both goals that United scored, including getting the winner. He's not available as well. So that adds to the sort of the problems that Ruben Amorim's facing. We're a team that is in the bottom half of the table, and it shows, and it wasn't a great performance by Manchester United. I'm not saying that by any stretch, but I often think Gary Neville is a little bit harsh when he criticises United, and I think you do need a little bit of context here as well. You have to remember that United are struggling, that we are missing some key players, and that it's the same old problems that we faced all season. We just haven't got that quality that we need in the final third, and I think the manager knows that. He inherited a lot of these players. I think it's obvious we are going to go out and get a striker in the summer. Now, I'm not going to say just one player solves all our problems, but I think it will help. I don't think Rasmus Højlund had a particularly great game yesterday. It's not all his fault, because the service isn't great either, but I think there's a bad combination of the service not being great and a player who is lacking a bit of confidence. Now, hopefully, if you can get in another striker, take some of the pressure off Rasmus Højlund, maybe get someone who's a bit more of a proven goal scorer, and bring in another player, maybe hopefully another couple of players as well, we can see a bit of a difference. And I don't think the manager's cause was helped yesterday by one or two players not having their best game in a United shirt. I love Patrick Dorgu. I don't think that was one of his better games for Manchester United yesterday. Manuel Ugarte is another player that I really liked, and I think he's been a good signing. Again, especially in that first half, I thought he was a little bit sloppy in possession as well. So I don't want to single those two out because they weren't the only two players that underperformed, but you can see where perhaps United weren't quite the races. And one thing I will agree with on Gary Neville, I think he pointed out about Andre Onana at times sort of just rolling his foot over the ball, taking his time with it. That frustrated me a little bit. I did want to see a bit more urgency from United at times playing out from the back. But if you look at the numbers, it doesn't really tell you much of a story. I think United had more shots, City had more shots than us on target though. City had more possession. It wasn't a Manchester derby for the ages, but context, and we all know for Manchester United it is all about the Europa League. My biggest worry going into the game, and this might be negative, forgive me, but my biggest worry going into the Manchester derby yesterday was we'd get battered and we'd go into a Lyon game, feeling a severe lack of confidence with our tails down, just absolutely gutted. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to celebrate a 0-0 draw, obviously I'm not, but it's not the end of the world. We move on. We go into the Lyon game, which is far more important in the context of Manchester United season. Hopefully we can win that, get through to the next round of Europa League, hopefully go all the way in the Europa League and get Champions League football here next season. But it's interesting that Gary Neville sort of digging out the team, Ruben Amorim pushing back a little bit. We've seen this a few times this season, haven't we? I know Gary Neville's got a job to do, but I did feel it was a little bit harsh personally. Get involved in the chat in the comments and let me know what you think. Talking of managers pushing back, Pep Guardiola mentioned the chance towards Phil Foden's mum. I can't believe I'm saying these words. It's all a bit puerile and ridiculous, isn't it? But this is where we're at. I was at the game. I didn't even hear those chants, but Pep Guardiola told me about them, so thanks for that, Pep. Steve and Maka spoke about this last night. Look, I just think that Pep Guardiola would probably be better off just moving on from it and ignoring it. I think he's just going to encourage people to chant that, really, to be honest with you. And I think there's more important fish to fry when it comes to what's going on at the football clubs. I didn't hear the chants. I didn't take part in them. I probably wouldn't anyway. I definitely wouldn't anyway. I just think it's all a bit juvenile. And get involved in the chat in the comments and let me know what you think. But I do think that by Pep Guardiola highlighting it, he's almost going to encourage fans to say that, because that's what fans do, I'm afraid. You should know that by now, Mr. Guardiola. Just on the Manchester derby as well, there's a couple of players I want to single out. Casemiro, there's a stat I think from Statman Dave where Casemiro made more tackles than any in the Manchester derby than any player has across Europe's top 5 leagues. I think it was this season. I think it was 11 out of 11 tackles. And I've got to do a little bit of an apology to Casemiro, because a few months ago I more or less said, and I wasn't the only one, but I did say I think he's done at Manchester United. Casemiro, he wasn't really getting many minutes under Ruben Amorim. The only sort of contribution he seems to be doing was from the touchline when he was warming up, encouraging players who were playing. His attitude seemed fine. He seemed quite happy or okay with not being picked. He didn't seem to be kicking up a fuss. But you saw some of the performances towards the end of Erik ten Hag's reign. You look at the Liverpool game in particular and you think Casemiro, his legs are going. He's not the player he was at Real Madrid. He's not even the player he was at Manchester United in that first season. He's probably done, and he'll probably move on in the summer. However, over the last few weeks in particular, he has played his part. He is showing signs of the old Casemiro. I don't think he's anywhere near the player we saw in that first season or we saw in Real Madrid, but he's certainly contributing, and, good to see. We need him to play a part, especially with the injuries we've got, and he is certainly doing that, so fair play to him. Another player who played his part yesterday, according to the stats, and just from what I saw as well, was Bruno Fernandes. Had a bit of stick, hadn't he, Bruno Fernandes, from certain quarters. Not from me, though. I love him. 93% pass completion rate, I think it was. 7 out of 7 crosses as well. Pretty good stats from him. 7 ball recoveries. A decent performance from Bruno Fernandes. And yeah, it wasn't the greatest game. I don't think anyone can say that, but I thought he did well, and he covered the pitch as well, like he always does. So yeah, I think we can all just move on from the Manchester derby, and I think that might be best for everyone. There was a sitting protest yesterday, of course, after the game. We were there. We were talking about this last week with the 1958. They came into the studio, Steve from the 1958, to tell us all about it, protesting about the Glazers, about ticket prices. Good to see. There's at least 1,000 fans that stayed behind after the game. Good media coverage from that as well, and keep fighting a good fight. Impressed with everything that's going on there, and we've got to keep holding both Ineos and the Glazers to account when it comes to ticketing, when it comes to some of the decisions they've made and the mismanagement of this football club. And we will always highlight the protests and give a voice to the people taking part in the protest on this channel, as we have done in the past. We've got loads more videos coming up on the channel as well. We're going to have Adam McCullough's here. Going to have the Paddock podcast as well later on today. Don't forget as well, you can see the post-match reaction from Steve and Maka. Good to see them two together. People were saying in the comments, what, see more of them two together. You are going to be seeing a lot more of that on the channel, but those two are picking the bones through what happened in the Manchester derby, and also Pep Guardiola's comments as well. So make sure you're checking that out. Don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe. I'm Motty. This has been The Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.